The cashier swiped my debit card twice for a single carton of milk. Both times the screen flashed, declined. Confused, I called my son. He chuckled and said, "Dad, you're spending too much." Before I could answer, my daughter-in-law grabbed the phone. "From now on, you ask permission before you spend another dollar." I hung up without another word, drove straight to the attorney who handled my late wife's estate, and 2 hours later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. That's when I realized they had no idea what they had just started. Take a moment with me before this story begins. If you're listening, drop a quick comment below. Tell me what you're doing right now. Working, driving, or just taking a break. I read every single one. A quick note, some details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling. What matters most is the message it carries. The cashier ran my card a second time, and the machine beeped, declined again. I stood there at the Harris Teeter checkout with a single carton of milk in my hand, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and tried to understand what was happening. At 72, standing in that frozen food aisle on a November morning, I had spent 40 years designing aircraft hydraulic systems at Lockheed Martin and 7 years in retirement. I had calculated stress loads on wings at 30,000 feet, mapped fuel distribution for commercial jets, mentored 24 younger engineers. Yet nothing had prepared me for the sound of a payment terminal rejecting my own money. "Sir." The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Jessica, looked at me with something between pity and impatience. "Do you have another card?" Behind me a line was forming. A woman with a cart full of groceries. A man holding coffee and a newspaper. Normal people doing normal things on a Tuesday morning at 7:45. I felt their eyes on my back. "No, that's the right card," I said, hearing the confusion in my own voice. "There's money in that account. $15 million to be precise." My wife and I had been careful. 40 years of steady savings, smart investments, a pension that paid out reliably every month. We'd raised 2 children, sent them to good schools, bought a house we owned outright. When Helen died 8 years ago, the estate lawyer had confirmed everything was in order. I was financially secure for the rest of my life, and yet my card had just been declined buying milk. "Maybe try it one more time," I suggested. Jessica sighed but swiped again. The machine beeped immediately, declined. I reached for my wallet and found a $20 bill folded in the back emergency cash. Helen had taught me to always carry spare money. 20 years married to an engineer, she used to say, and you'd forget your head if it wasn't bolted on. I handed Jessica the 20 for the $3 carton of milk and accepted my change without meeting her eyes. The automatic doors opened to cold November air. I walked across the parking lot to my car, set the milk on the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel with the engine off. Through the windshield, I could see other shoppers coming and going, loading groceries into trunks, buckling children into car seats, living their ordinary lives. I pulled out my phone and called my son. Bryce answered on the 3rd ring. "Dad, what's up?" "My card was just declined," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Twice." At the grocery store, there was a pause. Then my son Bryce, 49 years old and founder of 3 failed software ventures over the past 2 decades, laughed. Not the nervous laugh of a man caught off guard. Something colder. "Dad, relax," he said. "I'll handle it." "They handle what? There should be plenty of money in that account. I haven't been spending." "You're spending too much," Bryce interrupted. "We talked about this." We had not talked about this. I would have remembered. "Well, what are you talking about?" I asked. "I bought groceries last week. Gas. That's it." "Dad, you're 72. You don't need to worry about this stuff anymore. That's why you have me." The parking lot was emptying out. A woman pushed a cart past my car, her toddler singing something tuneless from the cart seat. I watched them disappear between the rows of vehicles. 40 years of precision engineering calculating stress loads on aircraft wings at 30,000 feet, and I couldn't buy milk for my granddaughter. I said slowly, I need access to my own money. You have access. You just need to be smarter about it. Then I heard voices in the background, and Bryce said something muffled his hand over the phone. When the line cleared, it wasn't my son speaking anymore. Jasper. Jacqueline's voice was precise and emotionless. My daughter-in-law, 46 years old, a senior engineer at a cybersecurity firm downtown. She and Bryce had been married 11 years. We'd never been close. From now on, you need permission before spending money. I sat there, the phone pressed against my ear, trying to process what I'd just heard. Permission, I repeated. Yes. We can't have you draining accounts on impulse purchases. You'll call Bryce first, tell him what you need, and he'll approve it. This is for your own protection. For my own protection. I thought of Margot. 8 years old, with her mother's dark curls, lying home with a fever that November morning, waiting for the milk I'd promised to bring back. Margot, my granddaughter, who'd been living with Bryce and Jacqueline for the past 3 years, since her mother, my daughter, Eleonora, died in a car accident on a rainy night in 2019. Margot, who called me every Sunday evening and asked when she could visit again. Margot, who deserved better than this. I need to go, I said quietly. Remember what we discussed, Jacqueline said. Permission first. The line went dead. I sat there with the carton of milk warming in the passenger seat, the phone still in my hand. Around me, the parking lot continued its normal rhythm. Cars came and went. People loaded groceries. The sun climbed higher in a gray November sky. When exactly does a sun stop being your sun and become something else entirely? I had designed systems that kept passengers safe at 500 miles per hour. I had mentored engineers half my age, taught them to see the invisible stresses that could tear metal apart. I had buried my wife 8 years ago and kept going. I had survived my daughter's death 3 years later and kept going, but I had never felt like this. Like a stranger in my own life. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. 72 years old, gray hair that needed cutting, lines around my eyes from 4 decades of squinting at technical drawings. A face I'd seen every morning for as long as I could remember, and I decided I will not let this go on for another single day. The law office that handled Helen's estate 8 years ago was near the courthouse. Simone Ashford, the attorney who'd walked me through probate when I could barely remember my own name from grief. She'd been kind, thorough. She'd given me her card and told me to call if I ever needed anything. I'd kept that card in my wallet. I pulled it out, now looked at the number printed below her name. Her office opened at 10. I had 2 hours. I started the engine, put the car in reverse, and drove toward home with the milk my granddaughter needed, and a growing certainty that something was very, very wrong. Simone Ashford's office smelled like old paper and leather, the same smell from 8 years ago when she'd guided me through my wife's estate. I'd driven home, brought Margot her milk, watched her take her fever medicine, and driven straight back out. She'd asked where I was going. I told her I had an errand. She was 8. She believed me. Now I sat across from Simone in her second-floor office in uptown Charlotte, watching her review my bank statements with the same careful attention I'd once given to aircraft blueprints. She was 54 now, her dark hair shorter than I remembered, reading glasses perched on her nose. When Helen died, Simone had walked me through probate with patience and precision. When I'd called her office at 9:30 this morning, she'd cleared her schedule immediately. "Walk me through what happened," she said. I told her about the grocery store, the declined card, the phone call with Bryce, Jacqueline's cold demand for permission. Simone made notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving in quick, efficient strokes. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me directly. Did you give Bryce power of attorney? Hoax am I knows so? No. Did you sign anything recently? Any documents he brought you? Nothing. She nodded, pulled up something on her computer, and spent several minutes typing and clicking. I sat there watching the morning light angle through her office window, illuminating dust motes in the air. Outside, Charlotte moved through its normal Tuesday rhythms. People going to work, living their lives. Okay, Simone said finally. Here's what I'm seeing. They managed to freeze your joint checking account, the one you and Bryce share for household expenses. But they couldn't touch anything else. I leaned forward. What do you mean? Your personal accounts, your investment portfolio, the real estate holdings, Helen's trust. All of it is completely under your control. They got access to one account with maybe 15,000 in it. Everything else is locked tight. I felt something loosen in my chest. So this is just Bryce being stupid with my debit card. Simone's expression shifted. Not worry exactly. Something heavier. Jasper, she said slowly. Why would your son try to freeze your bank accounts at all? The question hung in the air between us. I don't know, I said. And why would he tell you that you need permission to spend money when he doesn't actually have any legal authority to enforce that? I had no answer. She read numbers the way I read blueprints, clean, methodical, no wasted motion, and for a moment I felt almost normal again, like I was back in the engineering office at Lockheed Martin reviewing stress calculations with a colleague I trusted, someone who understood that precision mattered, that details saved lives. There's another thing, I said. Margot, my granddaughter. She's been living with Bryce and Jacqueline since Eleonora died. I remember, Simone said quietly. The car accident. I'm so sorry, Jasper. I should have reached out. It was 3 years ago, November 13th, 2019. Rainy night. Single vehicle accident. Police said she lost control on a curve. Simone was very still. Jasper, she said, before you go, there's something else I need you to see. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a file, thinner than the one she'd been working from. Older. I could see the tab from across the desk, Eleonora Ramsey. My daughter's name. Simone set the file on the desk between us, but didn't open it immediately. 3 years ago, she said, Eleonora called this office. She didn't ask for me specifically. I handle estates and trusts. She was transferred to our family law department. She wanted to schedule an appointment to change Margot's legal guardian. The office was very quiet. I could hear traffic outside, the hum of the heating system. What? I said. Yeah, she made the appointment for Wednesday, November 14th, 2019. Simone opened the file and turned it so I could see. There was an intake form half completed. Eleonora's handwriting, her signature at the bottom, and a date 11/14/2019 2:00 p.m. Eleonora died on Tuesday the 13th. I said. My voice sounded distant in my own ears. I know. The night before her appointment. Yes. I stared at my daughter's handwriting. She'd written her name in the careful block letters she'd used since elementary school. Eleonora Marie Ramsey, age 38. Reason for appointment, guardian designation for minor child. When does a coincidence stop being coincidence and become something you can calculate, measure, prove? Did she say why? I asked. Why she wanted to change guardians. She didn't give details over the phone, just said it was urgent. The receptionist noted that she sounded stressed. Who was Margot's guardian before? Your son. Bryce was named in Eleonora's will as Margot's guardian if anything happened to her. He's Margot's uncle. It made sense at the time. Eleonora, who died at 38, 3 years ago, in what police called an accident, had scheduled an appointment to change Margot's legal guardian for the day after she died. I sat there looking at the intake form. At my daughter's signature, at the date that never came. Jasper, Simone said gently. Did you know she was planning this? No, I said. Then, but I think I'm starting to understand. Simone watched me carefully. What are you thinking? I thought about my card being declined, about Bryce's laugh on the phone, about Jacqueline's cold voice demanding permission, about my 8-year-old granddaughter living with people who were trying to cut me off from my own money, about my daughter dying the night before she could protect her child. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that I need to know exactly what happened on November 13th, 2019. The police investigated. They ruled it an accident. I know they did. Jasper. Simone's voice was careful. What are you saying? I looked at her directly. I'm saying my daughter was trying to take Margot away from Bryce, and 12 hours before she could do that, she died in a single car accident on a rainy night. And now, 3 years later, the same son who became Margot's guardian is trying to control my bank accounts. Simone didn't look away. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, I said. It's a question, and I need to find the answer. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the desk and tapped the file. I'll make you a copy of everything I have, she said. I drove home in total silence. Not because I had nothing to think about, but because too many things were lining up in my head, piece by piece, like engineering blueprints, locking together in a way I prayed they wouldn't. Eleonora tried to protect Margot. Someone stopped her one day before she could. And I had spent 3 years believing it was an accident. The photo on my desk showed Eleonora at 25, laughing at something just off camera, her dark hair catching sunlight. I kept it there beside my engineering notebooks, a reminder of who she'd been before everything went wrong. It was 10 o'clock at night. The house was silent. I sat at my desk with a yellow legal pad and began building a timeline the way I'd once drafted hydraulic systems, every component logged, every connection mapped, every stress point identified. November 13th, 2019, rainy night. Single vehicle accident on Highway 51 south of Matthews. Eleonora's car left the road on a curve, struck a tree. Police report said she died on impact. No witnesses, no other vehicles involved. I wrote the date at the top of the page. Then underneath, who found the car? Who called 911? Who identified the body? I pulled up the news articles I'd saved 3 years ago, back when I could barely read them through my grief. The Charlotte Observer had run a brief obituary. Local engineer killed in accident. Survived by daughter Margot, age 5. Brother Bryce Ramsey. Father Jasper Ramsey. The accident was reported at 11:47 p.m. by a passing motorist. Eleonora had left work at 6:30 p.m., 5 hours unaccounted for. I wrote, where was she between 6:30 and 11:47? The police report I'd never asked to see it. At the time, I was drowning in grief. Helen had been gone only 5 years. Losing Eleonora felt like losing the last piece of my wife I had left. I'd let Bryce handle everything. The funeral arrangements, the estate, Margot's guardianship. I'd trusted my son because he was my son. I wrote, who stood to gain from Eleonora's death. Bryce became Margot's guardian. Margot came with a trust fund money Helen and I had set aside, plus Eleonora's own savings and life insurance. I didn't know the exact amount. I'd signed the guardianship papers without reading them carefully. Bryce said it was standard. I believed him. I wrote how much money, who controls it. I remembered the funeral. November weather, cold and gray. I'd stood beside the grave watching them lower my daughter into the ground. Bryce stood next to me in a black suit, his face composed, dry-eyed. At the time, I'd thought everyone grieves differently. Some people hold it inside. Some people can't cry in public. Tonight, I thought some people don't grieve at all. For 40 years, I built systems designed to keep aircraft in the air. Tonight, I was building something designed to bring a killer to ground. I wrote one final question at the bottom of the page. Where is Eleonora's car now? If it was evidence, where had it gone? The police would have released it after their investigation. To whom? To Bryce, probably. He was next of kin. He would have had it towed somewhere. Salvage yard, scrap metal, evidence destroyed. Unless. I picked up my phone and called Simone. It was late, but she answered on the second ring. I need to see the police report from Eleonora's accident, I said. And I need to know where her car is. I'll request the report tomorrow, Simone said. The car might be harder to track. Try. There was a pause. Then, Jasper, if you're right about this. I know, I said. You're talking about your son. I know what I'm talking about. She was quiet for a moment. Okay. I'll start digging first thing in the morning. I hung up and sat there staring at the timeline. 20 minutes of work, and already the accident looked different. Not like tragedy, like opportunity. I turned off the desk lamp and went to bed. I didn't sleep. The next afternoon, I drove to Bryce's house to visit Margot. Jacqueline answered the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jasper, she said, we weren't expecting you. I wanted to see my granddaughter. Of course, she's in the living room. Margot sat on the floor with crayons and paper spread around her. When she saw me, her face lit up. Grandpa, I sat down beside her. What are you drawing? She held up a picture. 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. The small one had dark, curly hair. The tall one had gray hair. This is Mommy and Grandpa, she said. I looked at the drawing. Where's your daddy? Margot was quiet for a moment. Then softly, I don't know. No Bryce, no Jacqueline. Just Eleonora and me. I studied Margot's face. 8 years old. Her mother's eyes. Her mother's careful way of choosing words. Do you remember your mommy? I asked gently. Margot nodded. She was sad a lot. Near the end. Before the accident. Sad about what? I don't know. But she used to cry when she thought I was sleeping. Margot picked up a red crayon, then set it down. One time I heard her on the phone. She was talking to someone. She said, Bryce can't do that. My heart stopped. Do you remember what else she said? Margot shook her head. Just that. And then she saw me listening and she smiled and said everything was okay. When does a child's memory stop being imagination and become testimony? But it wasn't okay, Margot said quietly. Because then she died. I reached out and put my hand on her shoulder. Before I could say anything, Jacqueline's voice came from the kitchen doorway. Margot has quite an imagination, doesn't she? I turned. Jacqueline stood there with a dish towel in her hands, smiling. How long had she been listening? Children process grief in interesting ways, Jacqueline continued. Her therapist says she sometimes conflates memories with stories she's invented. It's completely normal. Is that right? I said. Jacqueline's smile didn't waver. We're very careful about what's real and what's make-believe. Aren't we, Margot? Margot looked down at her drawing and said nothing. I stayed for another 20 minutes, playing with Margot, watching Jacqueline watch us from the kitchen. When I finally stood to leave, Margot hugged me. I love you, Grandpa, she whispered. I love you too, sweetheart. She squeezed tighter than usual, 8 years old, holding on as if she knew something she didn't have words to say. As I walked to my car, I looked back. Jacqueline stood in the doorway, phone already pressed against her ear. Calling Bryce, probably. Reporting what Margot had said. What I'd asked. Good. Tomorrow morning, Simone and I would walk into Heritage Community Bank and revoke every piece of access Bryce ever had. And I wanted them to know exactly what I was doing. Let them worry. Let them wonder what else I knew. Let them make mistakes. I signed my name for the 19th time, using the same Mont Blanc pen I'd carried for 30 years, the one Lockheed gave me when I made senior engineer. Margaret Caldwell, the branch manager in her mid-50s, reviewed the power of attorney documents with the same careful precision. I appreciated in any professional, no questions, no judgment, just procedure. 19 separate forms across her desk at Heritage Community Bank, each one revoking a different piece of access Bryce had accumulated. Simone sat beside me reviewing each document before I signed. We'd arrived at 9 o'clock sharp. Final one, Margaret said. General power of attorney revocation. I signed and set down the pen. Margaret gathered the documents. Processed within 24 hours. Your son will receive notification that access privileges have been modified, no specifics, just that changes were made. Thank you, I said. Outside, Simone turned to me in the parking lot. Now they'll know what you're doing. Good, I said. I want them to know. We need actual evidence, Jasper, not just suspicion. I'll find it, I said. That afternoon, I drove to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg police impound lot on North Tryon Street. Simone had confirmed it. Eleonora's car was still there. The case had never been formally closed. The car had been sitting in long-term storage for 3 years. The lot attendant walked me through rows of damaged vehicles and stopped beside a silver Honda Accord. Eleonora's car. The driver's side was crushed where it had hit the tree. The windshield shattered. I stood there remembering my daughter, remembering the funeral, remembering how I'd believed it was just an accident. I knelt beside the front driver's side wheel. The undercarriage was covered in 3 years of dust, but I could still see the brake line running along the frame. I didn't need fancy tools, just my eyes and 40 years of knowing how metal fails under stress. The line was severed completely. The edges were too clean, too precise. When a brake line ruptures from impact or corrosion, the metal tears. It frays. It shows stress fractures and irregular edges. This cut was straight, deliberate. I'd spent 40 years designing systems that kept people safe at 30,000 feet, and I'd missed the one that killed my daughter on ground level. I pulled out my phone and took photographs, close-ups of the severed line, wide shots showing its position. Evidence. Then I called Simone. The brake line was cut, I said. Not damaged in the accident. Cut before she ever got in the car. Silence. Then, you're certain. I've been looking at hydraulic lines since before you were born. Someone severed this deliberately. We need an official inspection, Simone said. I'll file for re-examination today. Do it. I drove home slowly, my mind racing. Eleonora had driven to work that morning 3 years ago with cut brake lines. She'd made it there safely, probably because she hadn't needed to brake hard. Then she'd left at 6:30 in the evening. 5 hours later, on a rainy night on a curved road, she'd needed to slow down, and she couldn't. At 7 o'clock that evening, someone knocked on my door. Hard. Insistent. I opened it to find Bryce standing on my porch, his face red with rage. Behind him, Jacqueline stood silent, observing. Dad, Bryce said, pushing past me into the house. What are you doing? I closed the door. I don't know what you mean. The bank. They sent me a notice. You revoked my access. I did. Why don't you trust me? I looked at my son, 49 years old. I'd taught him to ride a bike, paid for his college. And now he stood in my living room pretending to be hurt while plotting to steal my money. No, I said quietly. I don't. Bryce's expression shifted. The hurt vanished, replaced by something colder. You're not thinking clearly. The stress, losing Mom, losing Eleonora, it's affecting your judgment. My judgment is fine. The doctor doesn't think so, Bryce said. He says you need a financial conservator. You're not as sharp as you used to be. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What doctor? Dr. Fletcher. You saw him last month for your physical. I had. A routine checkup. He'd said I was in excellent health for my age. Dr. Fletcher said I was fine. He's concerned about cognitive decline, Bryce said smoothly. He mentioned it to me privately, said we should consider protective measures. Bryce was the hammer, loud, obvious, driven by desperation. But Jacqueline was the architect, and she'd been drawing blueprints for years. I looked past Bryce to where Jacqueline stood by the door. Her face was calm. Her eyes weren't worried. They were calculating, measuring my reaction, planning the next move. She was the one running this. "Get out of my house," I said. "Dad, now." Bryce stared at me, then turned and walked toward the door. Jacqueline followed, pausing at the threshold. "We're trying to help you, Jasper," she said softly. "I hope you'll see that before it's too late." Then they were gone. I stood in my living room, listening to their car pull away. Then I locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat in the dark for a long time. Finally, I went to my desk and brought out my engineering logbook, the kind I'd used for 40 years on aerospace job sites, where missing a single detail could bring down an aircraft. I began logging everything: the date and time of Bryce's visit, his exact words about the doctor, Jacqueline's silent observation, the threat of conservatorship, the medical records they'd clearly falsified months ago, preparing this trap long before I'd ever questioned them. Evidence. An engineer never misses a detail. The forensic expert's face filled Simone's computer screen. Graying beard, wire-rimmed glasses, the weathered look of someone who'd spent 40 years examining metal failures. 5 days had passed since Bryce and Jacqueline stood in my living room threatening conservatorship. 5 days of waiting for this call. I sat beside Simone in her office, my engineering logbook open on my lap, documenting everything. Dr. Kenneth Hayes, the automotive forensics specialist with 40 years examining crash mechanics, appeared on the video screen with the methodical precision of someone who understood that metal doesn't lie. "Mr. Ramsey," he said, his voice calm and professional, "I've completed the examination of your daughter's vehicle. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said. "What did you find?" Dr. Hayes adjusted his glasses and pulled up a series of photographs on the screen. Close-ups of this brake line, magnified images showing the metal edges. "The brake line was intentionally severed," he said. "The metal cuts were not caused by impact. They show deliberate tool marks consistent with wire cutters or similar implements." Simone leaned forward. "You're certain it wasn't impact damage?" "Completely certain. When brake lines rupture from collision forces, the metal tears irregularly. What we see here are 2 distinct cuts, one primary, one secondary, made with a cutting tool. The marks are unmistakable." He zoomed in on one of the photographs. I could see exactly what he meant. The edges were too clean, too straight. Someone had cut through the line deliberately, partially severing it so it would fail under pressure. "How long before failure?" I asked. "One, impossible to say precisely. But with a partial cut like this, the line would hold under normal driving conditions. Light braking, gentle stops. But any significant pressure emergency braking, hard stops, and the line would fail completely." Eleonora, my daughter, 38 years old, killed by her own car, and someone intentionally made it happen. "Well, this is evidence of criminal homicide," Simone said softly. "We need to go to the police." I sat there for 30 seconds, staring at the screen, at the photographs, at the proof that my daughter had been murdered. "Not yet," I said finally. "Knowing and proving are different things. If we go to the police now, they'll investigate. Bryce will lawyer up. Evidence will disappear. I need to know everything before we move. I'm planning to build an airtight case," I said. "The way I built hydraulic systems for 40 years. Every connection verified, every stress point calculated. No room for failure." Dr. Hayes cleared his throat on the screen. "I'll prepare my official report and send it to Miss Ashford. If you need me to testify, I'm available." "Thank you, Dr. Hayes," I said. The video call ended. Simone and I sat in silence for a long moment. "What's next?" she asked finally. "I need to understand why," I said. What made Bryce desperate enough to kill his own sister? I'll start digging into his finances, Simone said. See what I can find. I drove home through midday traffic, my hands steady on the wheel, but my mind elsewhere. Someone had crawled under Eleonora's car and cut her brake line. Someone had done it knowing she would drive that car, knowing she would need to brake, knowing she would die. At home, I went to my office and opened the closet I'd been avoiding for 3 years. Eleonora's belongings, the boxes I'd packed after the funeral and never opened. Her clothes, her books, her life reduced to cardboard containers in the back of a closet. I pulled out the smallest box, personal items. I opened it carefully. Photographs, a jewelry box, a stack of journals bound with a rubber band. I picked up the journals. 5 of them, different colors, different years. I opened the most recent one, black leather, dated on the first page, January 2019. Eleonora's handwriting. Small, precise, the same careful script she'd used since elementary school. I flipped through the pages. Entries about Margot, about work, about ordinary days and ordinary worries. Then 6 months before her death, the entries changed. May 15th, 2019. Bryce came by today asking for money again. He won't say what for, just that he needs it urgently. I told him I couldn't help this time. He got angry, said I didn't understand what he was dealing with. May 28, 2019. Bryce says if Dad finds out about his debts, he'll disown him. I've protected Bryce for too long. I can't stay quiet anymore. June 10th, 2019. Talked to Simone Ashford's office today. Made an appointment for November 14th. I'm changing Margot's guardianship designation. If anything happens to me, at least Margot will be safe. I stopped reading. November 14th, Wednesday. Eleonora died November 13th, Tuesday. What kind of mother writes, if anything happens to me, when planning to protect her daughter, and what kind of brother makes those words prophetic? I turned the page. The next entry was dated November 12th, Monday, the day before she died. Tomorrow I'm telling Bryce I know about the embezzlement. I'm giving him one chance to come clean to Dad before I do. Then Wednesday I'm meeting the lawyer. Margot deserves better than living with someone who steals from family. I'm scared, but I have to do this. For her. The journal ended there. No entry for Tuesday. No entry for the day she died. I set the journal down on my desk and sat there staring at my daughter's handwriting. She'd known. She'd known danger was coming. And she'd still gone not out of recklessness, but because she thought she had one more day. Tuesday to confront Bryce. Wednesday to protect Margot. Then safety. Someone stole that extra day from her. I picked up my phone and called Simone. Like I found Eleonora's journal, I said when she answered. She knew about Bryce's debts. She was going to expose him. She wrote, if anything happens to me 6 months before she died. Simone was quiet. Then she knew she was in danger. And she scheduled the guardianship change as protection, I said. Someone found out. Someone killed her Tuesday to stop Wednesday's appointment. Tomorrow I'll have the forensic accounting report on Bryce's finances, Simone said. We'll know exactly what he was hiding. I hung up and sat alone in my office, holding my daughter's journal, reading her last words over and over. I'm scared, but I have to do this. For her. 203, 847 Tatter, Section 6 on ton. The number sat at the top of the forensic accountant's report like a death sentence. The next morning, I sat in Simone's office, staring at the document she'd slid across the desk. 100 pages of financial analysis, bank records, corporate filings, debt schedules, the work of a professional who knew how to follow money through shell companies and false names. Over $2.1 million in failed tech ventures, Simone said quietly. 3 startups, 3 bankruptcies, 4 years of compounding debt. I flipped through the pages. Venture Core Solutions filed for bankruptcy in 2018, leaving $847,000 in unpaid debts. DataBridge Technologies collapsed in 2020, another $692,000 in losses. CodeStream Innovations, Bryce's most recent failure, shut down in 2021 with $564,000 in vendor debts and business loans. He never paid back any of it, I said. No. The debts are still outstanding. Collection agencies have been pursuing him for years. Lawsuits pending in 3 different jurisdictions. I thought about Bryce standing in my living room 3 weeks ago, his face red with manufactured outrage, demanding to know why I didn't trust him. There's more, Simone said, her voice careful. She turned to a section marked with a red tab. This is your joint checking account, the one you shared with Bryce for household expenses. I looked at the spreadsheet. Rows and rows of transactions, most of them small, ordinary. Grocery stores, utility payments, gas stations. Then Simone pointed to highlighted entries. These transactions route through 3 shell companies, small amounts at first, 200 here, 500 there, then larger, 2,000, 5,000, always just under the reporting threshold. How much total? I asked. $340,000. Over 14 months. From January 2021 through February 2022, $340,000 in 14 months. And he stood in front of me saying I needed permission to buy milk. This is textbook elder financial abuse under North Carolina law, Simone said. We can press criminal charges right now. The evidence is documented. The pattern is clear. A prosecutor would take this case in a heartbeat. I sat there looking at the numbers, the dates, the methodical theft stretched across more than a year. This wasn't desperation. This was planning. Not yet, I said. Simone leaned back in her chair. Jasper, I want to bring it all down at once, I said. Not piece by piece. Not criminal charges that might stick and might not. I want everything. The murder, the theft, the conservatorship trap. All of it proven beyond any doubt. That's a big risk. If they find out what we know, they already know I'm investigating. I made sure of that. Let them worry. Let them make mistakes. Simone was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. All right, but we document everything. And at the first sign of real danger, we go to the police immediately. Agreed. She pulled out another file. Thicker, older. There's something else you need to see, she said. Your will. I know what's in my will. Oh, do you? She opened the file and turned it toward me. When's the last time you looked at it? I thought about it. When Helen died, 8 years ago. You helped me update it. And then you updated it again in 2019, Simone said. Early 2019, before Eleonora died. I had no memory of that. Simone tapped the document. Primary beneficiary Margot. 65% of the estate, $9.75 million held in trust until she turns 25. I'm named as trustee. I stared at the numbers. $975 million for Margot. What does Bryce get? I asked. 15%. About $2.25 million. The remaining 20% is divided among charities and smaller bequests. I looked at the signature at the bottom of the page. My handwriting. My name. Dated March 2019. I don't remember signing this, I said. You were very clear about it, Simone said gently. You came in and said you'd been thinking about Margot's future. You wanted to make sure she had security. You said leave as much as possible to Margot. She's the one who'll need it most. 5 years ago, without even knowing why I'd need it, I'd built Margot a protection that would outlast me. Does Bryce know about this distribution? I asked. I doubt it. The will is confidential. Unless you told him directly, he probably assumes it's an even split between him and Margot, or that he's the primary heir. I sat back in my chair, processing. Bryce owed $2.1 million. He'd stolen $340,000 from me. He'd killed his sister to become Margot's guardian, and he thought that when I died, he'd inherit everything. But Margot inherited $975 million. Margot, the 8-year-old girl living in his house. Margot, whose trust would be managed by Simone, completely outside Bryce's control. That's why they need the conservatorship, I said slowly. What? They can't access Margot's inheritance. Not legally, not while I'm alive and competent. But if they can prove I'm mentally incapacitated, if they get conservatorship, they control everything. My assets, my decisions. They could challenge the will, claim I wasn't competent when I signed it. Simone's expression shifted. Or worse. Worse. If you die while they have conservatorship, they're Margot's legal guardians. They could petition to control her trust, argue they should manage the $975 million for her benefit until she's 25. 17 years of access to nearly $10 million, I said. Simone nodded. More than enough to pay off $2.1 million in debt and live very comfortably. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, Charlotte moved through its afternoon rhythms. People walking, cars passing, normal lives. My son had murdered my daughter, then positioned himself to steal from my granddaughter, and when I'd started asking questions, he'd built a trap to take everything. And now I understand why they need to control me, I said. Not because they hate me, but because as long as I'm alive and lucid, they can never touch a single dollar meant for Margot. The conservatorship, the frozen accounts, the falsified medical records, none of it was improvised. This was engineered. What are you going to do? Simone asked. Document everything, I said, and wait for them to make their move. They'll file the conservatorship petition soon, Simone said. Once they do, we'll have to respond quickly. I turned from the window. How long do you think we have? Days, maybe a week. Then let's be ready. The courier arrived at 9:17 a.m., I know, because I logged it the moment the doorbell rang, the way I'd been logging everything for 3 weeks. 3 days had passed since Simone showed me the will. 3 days of waiting for the next move. I signed for the envelope, closed the door, and opened it at my desk with my engineering logbook ready. Court documents. Official seal. Mecklenburg County Superior Court. Petition for emergency conservatorship. Petitioner Bryce Ramsey. Respondent Jasper Ramsey. I read through the filing. The language was clinical, devastating. Severe cognitive decline. Memory loss. Disorientation. Impaired decision-making. Inability to manage financial affairs. Poses risk to self and others. Attached to the petition, medical documentation. 6 pages of notes signed by Dr. Raymond Fletcher, the physician Bryce had introduced 2 months ago as a great doctor for seniors. I'd gone in for what I thought was a routine checkup. Blood pressure. Cholesterol. Reflex tests. According to Dr. Fletcher's notes, I'd exhibited profound memory deficits. Couldn't recall the date. Became confused during simple tasks. Showed signs of progressive dementia. None of it was true. I picked up my phone and called Simone. They filed, I said when she answered. When? Yesterday. I just got served. Emergency conservatorship petition. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She arrived in 15. I had the document spread across my desk when she walked in. Simone read through the petition in silence, her expression growing harder with each page. When she reached the medical notes, she stopped. Took emergency petition for conservatorship, citing signs of severe cognitive decline, memory loss, disorientation, impaired decision-making. She said quietly, "They've been setting this trap for months." 2 months, I said. Since the doctor visit in September. Bryce suggested I get a checkup. Said Dr. Fletcher was excellent. I thought he was being helpful. He was manufacturing evidence, Simone said. She tapped the medical notes. But they made one mistake, a fatal one. What mistake? You're an engineer. You've been logging everything. She gestured to my desk. And I have 14 months of bank statements proving you're completely lucid. I looked at my engineering notebook on the desk, 40 years of records. Every detail, every date, and thought. They picked the wrong man to accuse of losing his memory. We fight this, Simone said. We get our own medical evaluation. We submit your records. We expose the fraud. How long do we have? And the hearing is in 2 weeks. Emergency petitions move fast. But 2 weeks is enough time to build a defense. Good, I said. Because I'm not giving them anything. Simone gathered the documents. I'll file our response tomorrow. In the meantime, Keith Novak has been following up on the parking garage footage. He's got something. What kind of something? The kind we need to see in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I met Simone and Keith Novak at her office at 2 o'clock. Keith was a former Charlotte Mecklenburg police detective, 25 years on the force before going private. He had the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades asking uncomfortable questions. Mr. Ramsey, he said, shaking my hand. I've been looking into your daughter's accident, specifically the parking garage where her car was kept. He pulled up a file on Simone's computer. Security camera layouts, timeline diagrams, technical reports. The parking garage has internal cameras on every level, Keith said. On November 12, 2019, the night before your daughter died, the garage's internal camera footage is missing exactly 18 minutes, from 11:45 p.m. to 12:03 a.m. Equipment malfunction, I asked. That's what the garage security company claimed at the time. But I pulled the maintenance logs. No reported failures, no service calls. The footage was deliberately wiped. When does 18 minutes of missing footage stop being technical failure and become evidence of murder? Someone tampered with the system, Keith continued. But they missed something. The neighboring office building has an exterior camera that covers the garage entrance. Lower resolution, but it was running that night. He pulled up a video file. Grainy footage. Dark parking garage entrance. Timestamp in the corner, 11:47 p.m., November 12, 2019. A silhouette appeared at the edge of the frame, walking toward the garage entrance. Face unclear, too far from the camera lighting, too poor. But the posture was distinct. The gait, the build. I leaned closer to the screen. Can you enhance this? Simone asked. I tried, Keith said. Resolution's too low, but we have enough to establish someone entered the garage during the missing footage window. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. I watched the silhouette move across the frame. 40 years of analyzing structural failures, stress patterns, mechanical movements. All of it translated instantly to human biomechanics. The way the figure moved, the shoulder position, the stride length, the hip angle. Do you recognize them? Simone asked. I nodded slowly. That's not my son. Simone and Keith both turned to me. You're certain? Simone asked. I'm certain. That's not Bryce. How can you tell? Keith asked. The image quality, the posture, I said. The gait, the build. I've watched Bryce walk for 49 years. That's not him. Then who is it? Simone asked. I stared at the screen. At the silhouette frozen mid-stride. At the way the figure moved, confident, purposeful, mechanical precision. It's a woman, I said. The room went silent. Keith rewound the footage and played it again. We watched the silhouette walk across the frame 3 more times. He's right, Keith said finally. Look at the hip movement, the shoulder carriage. That's female biomechanics. Simone leaned back in her chair. Jacqueline. She's a cybersecurity engineer, I said. She knows how to edit video logs, delete files, cover digital tracks. And Bryce? Simone asked. Bryce was the planner, I said. But Jacqueline was the one who executed it. Keith pulled up another file. I checked Bryce's calendar from that week. November 12, 2019, he was at a tech networking event downtown. 40 people in attendance. He has an alibi. Of course he does, I said. Because he wasn't the one cutting brake lines. She was. Simone closed the laptop. We need more than a silhouette. We will, I said. Keep digging. If Jacqueline was there that night, there's more evidence. Phone records, credit card transactions, security badges. She left traces, we just have to find them. I drove home as dusk settled over Charlotte. The conservatorship papers sat in the passenger seat beside me. The image of that silhouette burned in my memory. Jacqueline, not Bryce. She'd killed Eleonora with her own hands. The silhouette's posture, shoulders forward, shorter build, narrower gait, didn't match Bryce's frame. And after 40 years reading structural stress patterns, I knew bodies the way I knew metal. Simone sat forward, studying the frozen image on her computer screen. Keith had left us alone to review the footage. The office was quiet except for the hum of traffic 14 floors below. Walk me through it, Simone said. How can you be certain it's not Bryce? I pointed to the screen. The shoulder width. Bryce is broad, 6'1", 200 pounds. This person is narrower. 5'6", maybe 5'7". And look at the hip movement. The gait. That's female biomechanics. Simone pulled up another file on her computer. Keith confirmed Bryce's alibi before he left. Monday, November 12, 2019. Business dinner at Fleming's Steakhouse in South Park. Meeting logs show he checked in at 7:15 p.m. Security cameras in the building lobby show him leaving at 11:05 p.m. And the garage footage was tampered between 11:45 p.m. and 12:03 a.m., I said. Exactly. Bryce couldn't have been at both places. I thought about the night Bryce had stood in my living room, face red with manufactured rage, while Jacqueline watched from the doorway. Silent. Calculating. Observing every word, every reaction. Jacqueline is a senior software engineer at a cybersecurity firm, I said. She knows how to edit video logs, delete files, cover digital tracks. Simone set her pen down. So Bryce planned it. Jacqueline executed it. And for 3 years, they've kept this secret together. Until I started asking questions, I said, and then they tried to bury you under conservatorship papers. I stared at the silhouette on the screen. My daughter-in-law. Walking into a parking garage at 11:47 p.m. with wire cutters in her pocket. Crawling under Eleonora's car. Severing the brake line with mechanical precision, then going home to sleep beside my son. We need more evidence, Simone said. The silhouette isn't enough. We need phone records, financial transactions, something that puts her at that garage. Keith is still digging, I said. And in the meantime, we have the conservatorship hearing in 2 weeks. We fight that first. Prove you're mentally competent. Expose the fraud. Then we build the murder case. I thought of Margot, 8 years old, living in that house with the woman who cut her mother's brake lines, and suddenly everything became very simple. I need to get Margot out of there before they realize we know. How fast can we move on custody? I asked. You're not her legal guardian, Simone said carefully. Bryce is. Changing that requires a court petition, evidence of unfitness, best interests of the child. How long? Months. Maybe longer. Margot doesn't have months, I said. She's living with her mother's killer. Simone was quiet for a moment. I know, but we can't rush this. If we tip our hand too early, they'll destroy evidence. Disappear. Take Margot somewhere we can't reach her. She was right. I knew she was right. But every instinct I had was screaming to drive to that house, take Margot, and never look back. 2 weeks, I said. We win the conservatorship hearing, then we file for custody immediately. Agreed. I drove home as the sun set over Charlotte. The city lights came on one by one, ordinary people finishing ordinary days. I thought about how many of them were sitting down to dinner with their families right now. How many of them trusted the people they loved. How many of them were wrong. At home, I went to my office and sat at my desk. The engineering logbook lay open to today's entry. 3 weeks of meticulous documentation. Every conversation, every discovery, every piece of evidence, but I pulled out a fresh notebook. Different purpose. I opened it to the first page and began writing. Not for court, not for evidence, for Margot. Someday she would grow up. Someday she would ask questions about her mother, about what happened, about why. And when that day came, she deserved to know who Eleonora really was. For 40 years, I'd designed redundancies and fail-safes into aircraft systems backup plans for when the primary fails. And tonight, I was building the same architecture, not in metal, but in words Margot would read someday. I wrote about Eleonora, about the journal entry where she'd written, "I'm scared, but I have to do this." For her. About the appointment she'd scheduled for Wednesday. About the courage it took to stand up to her own brother. Then I wrote directly to her. "Eleonora, you were right to schedule that Wednesday appointment. I was just 3 years late in understanding why you needed it. I'm sorry." I set down my pen and looked out the window. The first snow of the season was beginning to fall. Soft flakes drifting past the streetlight. November in North Carolina didn't get snow often. When it came, it felt like the world was holding its breath. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Simone. I picked it up and read, "Your son just filed an emergency petition for temporary custody of Margot. Hearing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. I read the message 3 times. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated. They must have sensed something. Some shift in the wind. Some sign that I knew more than I should. Or maybe they'd always planned this. Maybe the conservatorship petition and the custody petition were always part of the same trap. Lock down Margot. Lock down me. Control everything." I texted back, "What are the grounds?" Simone's response came immediately. "Claiming you're an unfit influence. Mentally unstable." Filling Margot's head with false accusations against her father. I looked at the snow falling outside. Silent. Inevitable. Tomorrow at 9 I would walk into that courtroom. And Bryce would learn I wasn't the senile old man he thought I was. I stood and went to my filing cabinet. Pulled out every document I'd gathered. The forensic accounting report, the brake line analysis, the engineering logbook, Eleonora's journal. I couldn't use most of it tomorrow. The murder investigation wasn't public yet. But I could prove I was lucid, competent, capable of caring for my granddaughter. I worked through the night, organizing documents, preparing notes, leaving nothing to chance. By sunrise, every paper was in order. Outside, the snow had stopped. The world was clean and white and quiet. At 8 o'clock, I put on my best suit, picked up my briefcase, and drove to Mecklenburg County Courthouse. Bryce wanted custody of Margot. He was about to find out what happened when you underestimated an engineer. The marble floors of Mecklenburg County Courthouse echoed with footsteps at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before I would fight my son for custody of my granddaughter. Simone met me in the hallway outside family court. She carried a briefcase filled with the documents we'd organized through the night. Financial records, the engineering logbook, medical evaluations from my actual physician, not the fraudulent assessment Dr. Fletcher had manufactured. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. We walked into the courtroom together. Bryce was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table with his attorney. Jacqueline sat beside him, her expression calm and unreadable. Neither of them looked at me when I entered. Margot sat in the front row behind them, her legs swinging above the floor. When she saw me, her face brightened, but Jacqueline turned and whispered something. Margot looked down at her hands. Judge Patricia Winters, 58 and 20 years on the family court bench, reviewed the custody petition with the measured deliberation of someone who'd seen too many grandparents and parents battle over children caught in the middle. "Mr. Ramsey," she said, looking at me over her reading glasses, "you're petitioning for temporary custody of your granddaughter Margot Ramsey. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "And Mr. Bryce Ramsey, you're opposing this petition and seeking to maintain custody as the child's legal guardian." Bryce stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Winters looked at the paperwork before her. "Let's proceed. Mr. Lennox, you may begin." Marcus Lennox, Bryce's attorney, mid-40s, expensive suit, the polished confidence of someone paid well to make problems disappear, stood and approached the bench. "Your Honor, this petition is premised on a fundamental misunderstanding of Mr. Jasper Ramsey's current capacity. My client's father is 72 years old. He suffers from progressive cognitive decline as documented by his physician. He requires a financial conservator. He demonstrates impaired judgment and lacks capacity to provide stable guardianship for an 8-year-old child." Lennox submitted Dr. Fletcher's medical notes, the same falsified assessment attached to the conservatorship petition. Additionally, Lennox continued, "Mr. Jasper Ramsey has been making unfounded accusations against my client, demonstrating paranoid ideation and delusional thinking. This is not a stable environment for a young child." Judge Winters reviewed the medical notes in silence. Then Simone stood. "Your Honor, may I respond, please?" Simone approached the bench with our briefcase. "What Mr. Lennox presents as cognitive decline is in fact financial fraud. Mr. Jasper Ramsey is a retired aerospace engineer with 40 years of experience designing aircraft hydraulic systems. Here are 14 months of meticulously maintained financial records, demonstrating perfect clarity and precision." She submitted the bank statements, the engineering logbook, every document showing methodical, organized thinking. Furthermore, Simone said, "Here is an independent medical evaluation conducted last week by Dr. Sarah Morrison, a geriatric psychiatrist. Her assessment, Mr. Jasper Ramsey exhibits no signs of cognitive impairment. He scored perfectly on cognitive function tests. His memory is excellent. His judgment is sound." She handed the evaluation to the clerk. "The medical notes from Dr. Fletcher," Simone continued, "were manufactured as part of a fraudulent conservatorship scheme. We have documentation proving Mr. Bryce Ramsey has been systematically stealing from his father's accounts for over a year. The conservatorship petition is not about protecting Mr. Jasper Ramsey, it's about covering up elder financial abuse." Judge Winters looked up sharply. "That's a serious allegation, Ms. Ashford." "It's a provable one, Your Honor, and it's directly relevant to this custody matter. Mr. Bryce Ramsey is not a fit guardian." Lennox stood. "Your Honor, these accusations are baseless and inflammatory. I'll review all submitted documentation," Judge Winters said firmly. "Both parties, please be seated." We sat. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of papers being reviewed. I looked toward the front row where Margot sat. She was watching me. I smiled at her. She smiled back, tentative and small. I looked toward the courthouse exit where Bryce had his hand on Margot's shoulder. She looked back at me, gave a small wave, tiny and hidden, as if she didn't want anyone to notice, and I realized Margot is terrified. Finally, Judge Winters set down her papers. "I've reviewed both submissions," she said. "Mr. Jasper Ramsey, I'm satisfied you don't present with obvious cognitive impairment. However, the conflicting medical assessments and allegations of financial abuse require further investigation. I'm deferring final decision and ordering a social study. A court-appointed evaluator will assess both households and make a recommendation. My heart sank. In the interim, Judge Winters continued, temporary custody remains with the biological parent, Mr. Bryce Ramsey, pending completion of the study. Your Honor, Simone stood. Given the allegations, temporary custody remains as is, Judge Winters said firmly. The social study will be completed within 30 days. We'll reconvene then. Court adjourned. The gavel struck. I sat there watching Bryce stand and put his hand on Margot's shoulder. She looked back at me one more time as they walked toward the exit. Her eyes were wide, frightened. 30 days. Simone touched my arm. We'll file for emergency modification if they try anything. I promise. I drove home alone, my hands tight on the steering wheel. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, my phone rang. Simone. Bryce just attempted to withdraw $890,000 from the joint account, she said without preamble. Blocked by the active restraining order. Then he tried drawing against his home equity line. Also blocked. I pulled over to the side of the road. How much? I asked. 890, Suan. In a single attempt. $890,000 in a single withdrawal attempt. The same afternoon, he lost the custody hearing. He's preparing to flee the jurisdiction with Margot, Simone said. This isn't about paying debts anymore. This is an exit strategy. Margot, I said. I know, Simone said quietly. I've alerted the court. Filed a motion highlighting flight risk. But Jasper, they still have temporary custody. Legally, they can take her anywhere in the state. And if they leave the state, that would violate the custody order. But by the time we'd enforce it, they could be anywhere. I sat in my car on the side of the road watching December snow begin to fall. Light flakes drifting past my windshield. $890,000. In a single attempt. This isn't greed anymore, it's an exit strategy. They're preparing to run, and they're taking Margot with them. I started the engine and drove home through the snow, one question circling through my mind: how much time do I have before they disappear? Simone was already calling the police when I grabbed my coat. Wait, she said, phone in hand. Don't go there alone. Margot, I said, just one word. I drove to Bryce's house through morning traffic, my hands tight on the wheel. The houses in his neighborhood looked the same as always. Ordinary. Normal. People getting ready for work, walking dogs, living their ordinary lives. I pulled into Bryce's driveway. His car was there. Jacqueline's was gone. I walked to the front door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Bryce opened the door. He looked like he hadn't slept. Where's Margot? I asked. She's on a play date, he said. The school says she's not. It's Saturday, Dad. There's no school. I stared at him. It was Thursday. Where is she? I asked again. Bryce's face showed something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not defiance. Fear. Jacqueline took her, he said quietly. This morning. She said they were going to get breakfast. That was 4 hours ago. And you didn't call the police. Bryce stopped. I don't know where she went. I turned and walked back to my car. My phone rang as I reached the driver's door. Unknown number, I answered. Hello, a woman's voice, quiet, urgent. This is Jacqueline. Margot is with me. She is safe. I need to meet you, alone, right now. My blood went cold. Where? The empty mall parking lot on Independence Boulevard. 30 minutes. Come alone or I leave and you'll never see either of us again. The line went dead. I drove through the familiar neighborhood running every scenario in my head. Kidnapping flight worse. Then my phone buzzed and a woman's voice said, the last thing I expected. This is Jacqueline. I called Simone from the car. Jacqueline called, I said. She has Margot. She wants to meet. You where? Independence Boulevard, the old mall parking lot. I'm calling the police. No, I said. She said come alone or she disappears. I'm not risking Margot. Jasper. Track my phone, I said. If I don't call you in 1 hour, send everyone. I hung up before she could argue. The parking lot was empty except for one car parked at the far end. Silver sedan. Jacqueline's car. I pulled up beside it and got out. Jacqueline sat in the driver's seat. In the back, Margot was asleep, her head resting against a pillow, a blanket tucked around her. I walked to Jacqueline's window. She rolled it down. This was the first time I'd seen her composure completely cracked. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. She's safe, Jacqueline said. I didn't hurt her. I would never hurt her. You killed her mother, I said. Jacqueline flinched. I know what I did. Then why are you here? Because Bryce just threw me under the bus, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands kept shaking. This morning he met with his attorney, told him I acted alone, that he had no part in Eleonora's death, that I'm unstable, dangerous, acting without his knowledge. Before I tell you what Jacqueline said when we met face-to-face, comment A, if you think she's trying to save herself, or B, if you think she's trying to save Margot, and add one short reason why. A quick note, the next part includes some fictionalized details added for emotional impact. What matters is the lesson behind it. He's framing you, I said. Yes. Jacqueline reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive. But I have proof. Everything. Emails between us planning it. Voice recordings of him giving orders. Execution plans in his handwriting. Bank records showing he paid for the wire cutters. All of it. She held the drive up to the window. It's encrypted, she said. I'm the only one with the decryption key, but I'll give it to you. All of it. Every piece of evidence that proves Bryce ordered every step. What do you want in return? Jacqueline looked at the back seat where Margot slept. Promise me Margot will never know I was there that night. Promise me she'll never know I'm the one who cut the brake lines. Let her think it was all Bryce. Let me be the person who tried to protect her at the end, not the person who killed her mother. I looked at the back seat, Margot sleeping peacefully, 8 years old, unaware her stepmother just tried to bargain her silence for evidence of murder. I looked back at Jacqueline. You want me to lie to my granddaughter. I want you to protect her from a truth that will destroy her, Jacqueline said. She's 8. She doesn't need to know the woman who tucked her in at night for 3 years is a murderer. Let Bryce take that blame. He deserves it more than I do anyway. Well, because he planned it, because it was his idea, Jacqueline said. His debts, his desperation, his plan to get control of your money through Margot. I just executed it. And now he's pretending I'm the monster. She held out the USB drive through the window. Promise me, she said. Promise Margot will never know. I stared at her for a long moment. At the woman who'd murdered my daughter. Who'd lived in my son's house for 3 years, pretending to be a stepmother while stealing from me and planning her escape. Then I looked at Margot sleeping in the back seat. Innocent, safe, unaware. I don't make promises to the person who killed my daughter, I said quietly. But I promise Margot will be safe. That is all I can give you. Jacqueline's face crumpled. She nodded once, then handed me the USB drive through the window. The decryption key is written on a piece of paper taped to the back, she said. Everything you need is there. She started the engine. Wait, I said, Margot, she's yours, Jacqueline said. Take her. I'm leaving. Where? Somewhere Bryce will never find me. She looked at me one last time. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Then she put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving me standing in an empty parking lot holding a USB drive that could destroy my son. I opened the back door. Margot stirred, opened her eyes. "Grandpa," she said sleepily. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said. "Let's go home." The USB drive sat on Simone's desk like a locked vault. Small, silver, containing 3 years of evidence I couldn't access. I'd taken Margot to Simone's first, let her sleep on the office couch while we worked. She was safe. That was what mattered. Now Simone sat across from me with her laptop open, the USB drive plugged in. A digital forensics specialist she'd called in was running scans remotely, his voice coming through the speaker. "Preliminary analysis shows multiple file types," he said. "Video files, audio recordings, email chains, documents. But everything is encrypted." "Can you break it?" Simone asked. "AES 256, the specialist said. "Military-grade encryption. Without the decryption key, this is a brick." I pulled out the piece of paper Jacqueline had taped to the USB. Blank. No key written on the back. "She lied," I said. Simone looked at the blank paper. "Or she changed her mind." "How long to crack it?" I asked. 48 to 72 hours, the specialist said. "Maybe longer. No guarantees." AES 256, it's designed to resist brute force attacks. We're talking billions of possible combinations. Simone thanked him and ended the call. We sat in silence. "She encrypted it before handing it over," Simone said finally. "Smart. Keeps herself valuable. As long as we need that decryption key, we can't turn on her completely." "She's already gone," I said. "We don't even know where she is." "We could find her, put out alerts, track her phone." I thought about Jacqueline in that parking lot. The fear in her eyes, the way her hands shook on the steering wheel. "She's not coming back," I said. "And she's not giving us that key voluntarily." Simone pulled up a calendar on her computer. "The preliminary hearing is December 18th, 11 days away. If we can't decrypt this USB by then..." "We have other evidence," I said. "The brake line analysis, the forensic report, the security footage showing someone at the garage. It's not enough," Simone said quietly. "The silhouette is too unclear to definitively identify Jacqueline. The forensic report proves tampering, but doesn't prove who did it. We need what's on this drive. Jacqueline is out there somewhere holding the decryption key in her head, and the preliminary hearing is set for December 18th, 11 days away." I looked at Margot sleeping on the couch. 8 years old, safe for now. But for how long? "What if we don't crack it in time?" I asked. "Then we go to the hearing with what we have, and hope it's enough to bind them over for trial." "But Jasper, without the USB, Bryce's attorney will tear our case apart. He'll claim the forensic report is speculative. The security footage is inconclusive. Jacqueline has disappeared, which makes her look guilty, but it also makes her unavailable to testify against Bryce. So Bryce walks free. Not free, but maybe not convicted. And that means..." "Margot goes back to him," I finished. Simone nodded. I stood and walked to the window. 14 floors below, Charlotte moved through its Thursday afternoon. Ordinary people, ordinary problems. "Start the cracking process," I said. "And I'll look for another way." What other way? I don't know yet. That evening, I sat at home with my engineering notebook open. Margot was asleep in the guest room the first night she'd spent in my house in 3 years. I reviewed everything we had without the USB. Forensic examination of Eleonora's car brake line deliberately severed. Security camera footage, silhouette entering garage night before she died. Bank records, systematic theft over 14 months. Offshore account opened 18 months ago. Eleonora's journal entries, showing she knew about Bryce's debt-scheduled guardianship change. Appointment records, Wednesday meeting that never happened. Bryce's alibi business dinner couldn't have been at the garage. Jacqueline's expertise software engineer knows how to edit security footage. I stared at the list. It was compelling, circumstantial, but was it enough? My phone rang. Simone. Tech specialist called back, she said. He's running the brute force attack overnight. But he wanted me to know at current processing speed we're looking at 48 hours minimum. Maybe 72. And that's if we get lucky. And if we don't get lucky, then it could take weeks, months. We won't have it for the hearing. I thanked her and hung up. I sat there staring at my notebook. At 3 years of investigation compressed into 2 pages of notes. At the evidence that should be enough, but probably wasn't. My phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. No words. Just decryption key. ER38 Margot 2014 C. I stared at the screen. ER38 Eleonora's license plate. The same plates that were on the car the night Jacqueline cut the brake lines. Margot 2014, the year Margot was born. Jacqueline had used my daughter's license plate and my granddaughter's birth year as the encryption password. I didn't know what that meant. Whether it was guilt, or sentimentality, or just a password she thought I might eventually figure out. But I knew what it gave me. Access. I called Simone immediately. "We're in," I said when she answered. "Well, what?" "I have the decryption key. Jacqueline just sent it." Simone was silent for a moment. She sent it after disappearing, after encrypting it in the first place. Yes. Why? I looked at the text message again. At Eleonora's license plate number. At the year Margot was born. "I don't know," I said. Maybe she realized Margot needs this. Maybe she's got enough distance now that she's not worried about prosecution. Maybe she just wanted someone to know the truth. Or maybe, Simone said slowly, she knows we're the only ones who can stop Bryce from framing her completely. Does it matter? No, Simone said. I guess it doesn't. Can you forward me that text? I sent it to her. I'll get the specialist on it tonight, Simone said. We should have the files unlocked by morning. How long until you can review them? Give me a day, maybe 2. There could be hundreds of files. I need to catalog everything, verify authenticity, prepare for legal submission. And the hearing is in 11 days. I know, we'll make it. I hung up and sat there in the dark, looking at the text message. ER38, Eleonora's license plate. Margot 2014, the year Margot was born. Jacqueline used my daughter and granddaughter as the password, the woman who killed one to control the other. I don't know what that says about her, but in 7 days I would sit in Simone's office and unlock the USB. And I would hear my son's voice on a digital recording admitting what he'd done to his sister. And then I would know exactly what kind of man I'd raised. The cursor blinked in the password field, ER38 Margot 2014 C. And Simone's hand hovered over the enter key for just a moment before pressing down. 7 days had passed since Jacqueline sent the decryption key. 7 days of preparation, of organizing the other evidence, of building the case around what we hoped would be on this USB drive. 7 days of waiting. Now we were in Simone's office on a December morning. The USB drive plugged into her laptop, about to see what 3 years of lies had been hiding. Simone pressed enter. The screen flickered. A progress bar appeared. Decrypting files. We waited in silence. Then the folder opened. Dozens of files. Video files. Audio recordings. Email chains. Documents. All dated, all labeled, all organized with the methodical precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Simone clicked on the first video file. A garage security footage, she said quietly. Timestamp November 12, 2019. 11:47 p.m. That's the night before she died. The video began playing. Grainy footage, a parking garage, dim lighting, empty except for a few cars. Then a figure appeared at the edge of the frame. Not a silhouette this time. clear enough to see her face. Jacqueline wearing dark clothes, carrying something in her hand. She walked directly to Eleonora's car, looked around once, then knelt down beside the front wheel. The camera angle was perfect. We could see everything. Wire cutters in her hand. Professional grade, the kind you'd buy at a hardware store for electrical work. She reached up under the car. Her hands moved with mechanical precision. No hesitation, no uncertainty. I watched my daughter-in-law, 46 years old, senior software engineer, mother figure to my granddaughter, crouch beneath a car with wire cutters and sever the brake line that would kill my daughter 18 hours later. The timestamp showed she was there for 9 minutes. 9 minutes of methodical work. Cutting, testing, making sure. Then she stood, looked around one more time, and walked away. The video ended. Simone and I sat in silence. "There's more," Simone said finally. She opened an email chain. Subject line plan. From Bryce to Jacqueline. Dated October 2019, 6 weeks before Eleonora died. Woody is scheduling the appointment. We need to act before then. If she changes the guardianship, we lose access to everything. Jacqueline's reply. I'll handle it. You maintain your alibi. Business as usual. Bryce, how? Jacqueline. Better you don't know the details. Just trust me. Bryce, when? Jacqueline. The night before her appointment. Tuesday. She'll drive to work Wednesday morning, and the problem will solve itself. I read the emails twice. My son's words. Clinical, calculated. Discussing my daughter's murder like it was a business transaction. Simone opened another email. Bryce. Are you sure this will work? Jacqueline. I've researched it extensively. Brake line failure on a rainy night, curved road, no witnesses. The investigation will conclude mechanical failure or driver error. We'll be in the clear within a week. Bryce and Margot. Jacqueline becomes yours, which means access to Jasper's estate when the time comes. There's an audio file, Simone said quietly. Dated 2 weeks before the murder. Want me to play it? I nodded. She clicked play. My son's voice filled the room. A voice I'd known since he was a newborn baby, teaching him to ride a bike, to drive a car, to be a man. Now evidence in a homicide investigation. Just scare her, Bryce said. Cut it a little so the car can't go fast. She'll panic, call for help, realize she needs us. Then we can negotiate. Jacqueline's voice cold and mechanical. You don't understand mechanics, Bryce. A partial cut doesn't limit speed. It makes the brake line unpredictable. She could brake once and be fine, or twice and die. There's no way to control it. Then make it controllable, Bryce said. I can't. Physics doesn't work that way. If I cut the line partially, she dies. If I don't cut it at all, she goes to that appointment and we lose everything. Those are the only 2 options. Silence on the recording. 10 seconds. 15. Then Bryce's voice again, quieter. Do what you have to do. The recording ended. I sat there staring at Simone's laptop, at the folder full of evidence, at 3 years of lies compressed into video files and email chains and audio recordings. My son's voice on a digital recording, a voice I'd known since he was a newborn baby, now evidence in a homicide investigation. There's more, Simone said. Bank records showing Jacqueline purchased the wire cutters 2 days before the murder. Text messages between them confirming the timeline. Even a draft email Jacqueline wrote but never sent, outlining exactly how she planned to edit the security footage to remove the incriminating sections. She paused. She kept everything Jasper. Every piece of evidence that proves both of them were involved. This isn't just enough to reopen the investigation. This is enough to convict. I thought about Bryce sitting in my living room a month ago, asking me to drop the lawsuit to go back to how things were. I thought about him claiming Jacqueline acted alone. I thought about 49 years of being his father, believing I'd raised a good man. He knew, I said quietly. on that recording. When Jacqueline told him a partial cut would be lethal, he knew. And he said, "Do what you have to do." "Yes," Simone said. "He ordered my daughter's murder." "Yes." I stood and walked to the window. Outside, December rain had begun to fall, soft and steady. The same rain that had been falling the night Eleonora died. "What happens now?" I asked. "We take this to the police," Simone said. "Today, we hand over everything. The USB, the forensic reports, the timeline, all of it. And then we let the system do what it should have done 3 years ago." I turned from the window. "Will they reopen the case? With this evidence, they don't have a choice." I looked at the laptop one more time, at the folder full of my son's crimes, my son's voice on a digital recording. A voice I'd known since he was a newborn baby, teaching him to ride a bike, to drive a car, to be a man. Now I listened to it one last time inside a law office as evidence in a murder investigation. The recording ended. Simone and I sat in silence. Outside, December, rain began to fall. The glass doors of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department felt heavier than they should have. I pushed through them the morning after we'd unlocked the USB, Simone beside me carrying a briefcase with copies of everything. The original drive was in my pocket. I could feel its weight. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A desk sergeant looked up from his computer. "We need to speak with the detective who handled a case in 2019, Simone said. "Eleonora Ramsey, single vehicle accident." The sergeant checked his system. "That would be Detective Cortez, Homicide Division. Let me see if he's available." We waited in the lobby for 10 minutes. Then a man in his early 50s appeared, salt and pepper hair, weathered face, a worn badge clipped to his belt. Detective Raymond Cortez. The man who'd closed my daughter's case as an accident 3 years ago. "Mr. Ramsey," he said, extending his hand. "Detective Cortez, I remember your daughter's case. I'm sorry for your loss." I shook his hand. "We need to talk about that case." His expression shifted slightly. Professional wariness. "All right. Follow me." He led us to an interview room. Gray walls, metal table, recording equipment in the corner. We sat. Cortez folded his hands on the table. "What's this about?" he asked. "New evidence," Simone said. She opened her briefcase and pulled out the first file. "Evidence that proves Eleonora Ramsey's death was not an accident." Cortez's jaw tightened. The investigation was thorough. We examined the vehicle, interviewed witnesses, reviewed the scene. Everything pointed to mechanical failure on a rainy night. "You closed the case," I said. "Yes, based on the evidence available at the time." Cortez's coffee cup left ring marks on the manila folder. I counted 3 overlapping circles, my engineer's mind, finding patterns in chaos, while Simone opened her briefcase. "I recommended keeping it open," Cortez said quietly. "Initially. But my supervisor wanted closure. No signs of foul play, no witnesses, clean accident scene. I was overruled." I looked at him, saw something I hadn't expected. Regret. "What evidence do you have?" he asked. Simone laid out the documents systematically. Bank records showing the theft, text messages between Bryce and Jacqueline, offshore account statements, Keith Novak's surveillance report, the forensic analysis of the brake line. Cortez read each document carefully. His expression grew darker with each page. "This proves financial motive," he said. "And the brake line analysis shows deliberate tampering. But it doesn't prove who." "There's more," Simone said. She pulled out her laptop and opened the video file. Security footage from the parking garage. November 12, 2019. 11:47 p.m. She turned the screen toward Cortez. We watched Jacqueline walk into frame, kneel beside Eleonora's car, cut the brake line with methodical precision. Cortez leaned forward, his face inches from the screen. "That's Jacqueline Ramsey," Simone said. "The victim's sister-in-law." Cortez was silent for a long moment. Then, play it again. Simone played it 3 more times. There's also audio, she said. She opened the recording. Conversation between Bryce Ramsey and Jacqueline Ramsey 2 weeks before the murder. She pressed play. My son's voice filled the room. Just scare her, cut it a little so the car can't go fast. Jacqueline's response. You don't understand mechanics, Bryce. A partial cut makes it completely unpredictable. Bryce, do what you have to do. The recording ended. Cortez sat back in his chair. He looked at me, then at Simone, then at the laptop screen. I was wrong, he said quietly. We were wrong. I'm sorry, Mr. Ramsey. Sorry doesn't bring her back, I said. But justice might mean something to Margot. Cortez picked up his desk phone and called someone. I need you in interview room 3. Now. Bring the ADA. Within 90 minutes, the assistant district attorney had reviewed everything. 2 arrest warrants were approved. First-degree murder, conspiracy, tampering with a motor vehicle. I left the USB drive and all the copies with Cortez. Walked out of the police station into December sunlight. Simone drove me home. We didn't talk much. They'll execute the warrants tomorrow, she said when we reached my house. Both of them. Are you ready for that? I don't know, I said. Do you want me to be there when you tell Margot Takatitu? No, I need to do it alone. The next afternoon, I sat in my car outside Margot's elementary school. It was 2:45 p.m., 15 minutes until dismissal. Other parents were arriving. Normal afternoon pickup. A woman in the car next to mine applied lipstick in the rearview mirror, preparing for her normal routine. I wondered what normal looked like anymore. My phone rang. Simone. Both in custody, she said when I answered. Jacqueline surrendered this morning with her attorney at 9. Bryce was arrested at his home at 11:30. How did he? I stopped. What did he say? I kept repeating it was a mistake. Even now, he won't own what he did. They're both being held without bail. First-degree murder, conspiracy, tampering. They'll be arraigned tomorrow. I looked at the school building. Children's artwork in the windows, seasonal decorations, ordinary elementary school on an ordinary Thursday. Margot doesn't know yet, I said. I know. Are you ready to tell her? No, but I'm going to anyway. Call me if you need anything. I mean that. I will. I hung up and sat there watching the building. At exactly 3 o'clock, the dismissal bell rang. Doors opened. Children streamed out into the December afternoon. I watched for Margot. She appeared in the doorway, backpack bouncing on her shoulders. She scanned the pickup area, spotted my car, and her face lit up. She waved. I waved back. She ran toward me, weaving between other families, her smile bright and trusting. She didn't know. She thought this was a happy surprise. She climbed into the passenger seat, backpack bouncing, and asked the question I couldn't answer yet. Why did you pick me up today, Grandpa? Is it something special? I opened my mouth to tell her, but Margot spoke first. Is it about Daddy? She sat in the passenger seat, her backpack still on, looking at me with eyes too old for 8 years. Not afraid. Resigned. Did something happen? She asked quietly. I turned to face her fully. All the gentle words I'd prepared disappeared. Yes, I said. Your father and Jacqueline. They've been arrested, sweetheart. Margot nodded slowly, like she'd been expecting this. What did they do? She asked. I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my mind. Different words, different approaches, ways to shield an 8-year-old from the truth that her father had murdered her mother. But looking at Margot now, I realized she already knew something was deeply wrong. They hurt someone, I said carefully. Someone we both loved very much. Margot looked down at her hands. Mommy, my heart stopped. How did you? I didn't know, she said quickly. Not for sure, but I knew something bad happened. Jacqueline used to get angry when I talked about Mommy, and Daddy would get really quiet, like he was scared. She looked up at me. I've been scared too, Grandpa, in that house, for a long time. I reached over and took her hand. I heard them fighting once, Margot said. A few months ago, Jacqueline said something about you asking questions, and Daddy said they had to be careful. I didn't understand what it meant, but I knew it was bad. She'd been living with her mother's killers, knowing something was wrong, scared, alone. "So, can I live with you now, Grandpa?" she asked. Her voice was small but steady. I don't want to go back there. I pulled her into a hug. She held on tight. Yes, I said. Yes, sweetheart. You're staying with me. You're safe now. We sat in the parking lot while other families drove away to normal dinners, normal evenings. I held my granddaughter and wondered if either of us would ever feel normal again. But at least we'd feel it together. 5 days later, I walked into Mecklenburg County Courthouse for the preliminary hearing. Simone met me in the hallway outside courtroom 4B. She carried 2 briefcases full of evidence. "Ready?" she asked. "No," I said. "But let's do it anyway." We walked into the courtroom. Bryce sat at the defendant's table with his attorney. Jacqueline sat separately with hers. They didn't look at each other. Bryce looked at me as I entered. His face was pale, thinner than I'd ever seen it. 3 years of lies had carved lines into his features. Judge Margaret Vance, mid-50s, with a no-nonsense demeanor, entered, and we all stood. "Be seated," she said. "We're here for preliminary hearing in the matter of State versus Bryce Ramsey and Jacqueline Ramsey. Charges include first-degree murder conspiracy and tampering with a motor vehicle." She looked at Simone. "Counselor, you may present." Simone stood and walked the judge through everything. The forensic analysis of the brake line, the security footage, the audio recordings, the email chains, the financial records. She was methodical, clinical. Every piece of evidence laid out with precision. Judge Reeves reviewed each document carefully. When the audio recording played, Bryce's voice saying, "Do what you have to do." The judge's expression didn't change, but I saw her pen pause on her notes. Bryce's attorney whispered urgently to him. Bryce shook his head, whispered back. The attorney looked frustrated. Then Bryce stood. "Your Honor," he said. "I'd like to make a statement." His attorney grabbed his arm. "Bryce, don't." "I need to say this," Bryce said. Judge Reeves looked at Bryce's attorney. "Does your client understand his rights?" "Yes, Your Honor, but I strongly advise." "Mr. Ramsey understands and wishes to speak," the judge said. "Proceed." Bryce turned to face me directly. "I didn't mean to kill my sister," he said. His voice cracked on the word sister, like ice breaking over deep water. I heard the son I'd raised drowning under the man he became. I just wanted to scare her. I was drowning in debt. She was going to expose everything. I thought if she was afraid enough, she'd back off. Let things go back to normal. He looked at the judge. But I covered it up for 3 years because I was terrified of losing everything. My daughter, my freedom, what little I had left. Jacqueline's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client wishes to state for the record that she acted under coercion and duress." "Chuck, save it for trial, Counselor," Judge Reeves said. She looked at the evidence spread before her. At Bryce standing at the defendant's table. At Jacqueline sitting stone-faced beside her attorney. "I've reviewed the evidence presented," Judge Reeves said. "There is sufficient probable cause to believe that the defendants committed the offenses charged. Both defendants are bound over for trial. Trial date will be set within 90 days. Defendants will remain in custody without bond." She struck her gavel. Bryce looked at me one more time before the bailiff led him away. I didn't know what he wanted from me. Forgiveness, understanding. Permission to believe he wasn't a monster. I had none of those things to give him. I walked out of the courthouse with Simone into December sunlight. 90 days, she said. Maybe less. The evidence is overwhelming. They'll likely offer plea deals. What about Margot, I asked. Emergency guardianship is already filed. With both parents in custody, it's a formality. She's yours. I stood on the courthouse steps and pulled out the forensic accounting report. Flipped to the section on the offshore account. Opened June 2021. I pulled out my phone and searched my email for Eleonora's guardianship appointment confirmation. Scheduled June 2021. I looked at the dates. The offshore account was opened 2 weeks after Eleonora filed her guardianship paperwork. She wasn't just suspicious. She was building a case. Preparing to take Margot, protecting her daughter the only way she knew how. And Bryce knew. He knew she was a threat. Knew she was planning to take Margot away. Knew she was going to expose everything. So he had her killed. Eleonora wasn't a victim caught off guard on a rainy road. She was fighting back. And that's what got her killed. I stood there on the courthouse steps, December sun, warming my face, and thought about my daughter. About her courage. About her determination to protect Margot at any cost. She'd fought until the end. And now I would finish what she started. Simone placed the emergency guardianship petition on the judge's desk, 3 hours after the preliminary hearing ended. Finishing what Eleonora started meant bringing Margot home. Permanently. Legally. So that no one could ever take her away again. We sat in family court chambers, a smaller room than the criminal courtroom we'd been in that morning. Warmer. Books lining the walls. A window overlooking uptown Charlotte. Judge Ellen Brewster, late 50s with graying hair and reading glasses, reviewed the petition with the thorough compassion of someone who'd spent decades making decisions about children's lives. Mr. Ramsey, she said, looking up from the papers, you're petitioning for emergency guardianship of your granddaughter Margot Ramsey. Yes, Your Honor. Both parents are currently in custody pending trial for first-degree murder. Yes, Your Honor. She flipped through the documents. I see here that Margot has been staying with you since the arrests 5 days ago. Yes, she's safe, she's settled. She wants to stay. Judge Brewster looked at another page. Her expression shifted slightly. Interesting, she said. There's a notation here from June 2021. Eleonora Ramsey, Margot's mother, your daughter, filed initial guardianship designation paperwork, naming you as the preferred guardian in the event she became unable to care for Margot. I leaned forward. What? Oh, she never finalized it, Judge Brewster said. But the intent was documented. She wanted you to have guardianship if anything happened to her. Simone and I exchanged glances. Eleonora had been planning Margot's escape route even then. 18 months before she died. She'd known she needed to protect Margot. And she'd chosen me. Judge Brewster set down the papers and looked at me directly. Mr. Ramsey, are you prepared to provide full-time care for an 8-year-old child? The responsibility is significant. Margot will need stability, routine, emotional support as she processes what's happened. I've been waiting 3 years to bring her home, Your Honor. I said. I'm 72. I'm healthy. I'm financially secure, and Margot is the only family I have left. The judge studied me for a long moment. Then she signed the document. Emergency guardianship granted, she said. Margot Ramsey is now under the legal guardianship of her maternal grandfather, Jasper Ramsey, effective immediately. We'll schedule a permanency hearing in 90 days, but given the circumstances, I don't anticipate any challenges. Simone handed me the signed order, and I read my own name in the guardian line. After 72 years of designing trajectories for machines, I was now charting course for one small life. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. We walked out of the courthouse together. Simone touched my arm. Congratulations, she said. Margot is legally yours now. Eleonora would be proud. I looked at the guardianship order in my hand. My name. Margot's name. Official seal. Eleonora had wanted this, had planned for it, had trusted me to protect her daughter. Now I would. That evening, Margot and I stood in the spare bedroom at my house. It had been a guest room for years. Now it would be hers. The twin bed frame lay in pieces on the floor. I'd bought it that afternoon while Margot was still at school. "Ready to build?" I asked. Margot nodded. She picked up the instruction sheet and studied it carefully. We worked together. I showed her how to use the hex key, how to align the bolts, how to tighten them just enough, not too loose, not too tight. She lined up the bed bolts by size before assembly sorting them, the way I'd taught Eleonora 30 years ago, genetics carrying forward through grief, like light through water. "Like this?" Margot asked, turning a bolt. "Perfect," I said. Just like that. We assembled the frame piece by piece. The headboard, the side rails, the slats. Margot handed me tools and held pieces steady while I secured them. When we finished, we stood back and looked at our work. "We did it," Margot said. "We did. We made the bed together. Fresh sheets. A quilt my wife had made years ago. Pillows in new cases." Margot sat on the edge of the bed testing it. "It's good. I'm glad." She looked around the room, at the empty walls, the bare dresser, the blank space waiting to become hers. "Grandpa," she said quietly. "Can I have a picture of my mom for my room?" I felt something catch in my chest. "Of course, sweetheart. I have several. Let me get them." I went to my office and opened the drawer where I kept the photos I couldn't bear to display, but couldn't bear to pack away. Eleonora at various ages. Eleonora with Helen. Eleonora holding baby Margot. I found one from when Eleonora was 20. College graduation. She was smiling at the camera cap, tilted slightly to one side, her whole life ahead of her. I brought it back to Margot's room. "Choktitium, this is from when she was in college," I said, handing her the framed photo. "She's smiling in it." Margot held the frame carefully. She touched her mother's face through the glass. "She looks brave," Margot said. Was she brave? I sat down on the bed beside her. "Yes, she was very brave, especially at the end. She was trying to protect you." Margot nodded. She placed the photo on the nightstand beside her bed, turned it so she could see it from her pillow. "I miss her," Margot said. "Me too, sweetheart. Every day." We sat there together for a few minutes. Then Margot yawned. "Bedtime, I asked. "Okay." She changed into her pajamas, new ones we'd bought together, and climbed into the bed we'd assembled. I tucked the quilt around her. "Good night, Grandpa," she said. "Good night, Margot. I'm right down the hall if you need anything." "I know." I turned off the light and stood in the doorway watching her. She fell asleep within 10 minutes, one hand tucked under her pillow. I started to close the door when I noticed something on the floor. A small notebook that must have slipped from her backpack. I picked it up, opened it gently. Pages filled with crayon drawings. All of Eleonora. Dated every few months for the past 3 years. Her mother in a garden. Her mother reading. Her mother smiling. Margot had never stopped remembering. I turned to the last page. Dated 2 weeks ago. 3 figures, a woman with dark hair floating in the sky, a small girl in the middle, and an old man with gray hair holding her hand. Labels in careful letters: Mommy, me, Grandpa. She'd been planning her own escape just like her mother. I signed my name on the final trust document, and 9,075 million became Margot's future. Simone slid the notarized papers into a leather portfolio, her movements precise and efficient. We sat in her downtown office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a Charlotte skyline dusted with December snow. Margot was downstairs in this building's cafe with Simone's assistant, probably ordering her 3rd hot chocolate of the morning. "The trust is structured as irrevocable," Simone said. "Managed by my firm until Margot turns 25. At that point, she assumes full control." She folded her hands on the desk. Bryce receives nothing. However, she paused, choosing her words carefully. If Margot as an adult wishes to establish contact with her father after his release, that decision will be hers alone. The trust document doesn't prohibit it. I nodded. I couldn't control who Margot would become, what choices she'd make at 25 or 35. All I could do was give her the foundation her mother had fought to protect. Oh, Zekis, there's something else, Simone said. She opened a file drawer and withdrew a manila folder. When I was organizing Eleonora's documents for probate, I found this. She handed me 3 pages stapled together. The heading read, Preliminary Trust Instrument Draft. The date in the corner, June 14th, 2021. My daughter's handwriting filled the margins. Notes about investment strategies, educational provisions, trustee selection. And there highlighted in yellow, primary trustee Jasper Ramsey father, successor Simone Ashford attorney, June 2021. 5 months before she died. The same month she'd filed the guardianship paperwork Judge Brewster had mentioned. She knew, I said quietly. She was preparing, Simone corrected. Eleonora came to me that summer asking hypothetical questions about estate planning, custody arrangements, protective orders. She never said she was in danger, but she gestured at the draft document. She was building escape routes. I stared at my daughter's handwriting, the careful loops of my own name. She'd been planning for a year and a half, gathering evidence, preparing legal documents, making sure that if something happened to her, Margot would be protected, and then they'd killed her anyway. Thank you, I managed, for helping her, for helping us. Simone's expression softened. She was one of the smartest people I ever knew, Jasper, and one of the bravest. I folded the draft trust document and slipped it into my coat pocket. Someday when Margot was older, I'd show her this too. Another piece of proof that her mother had loved her enough to fight an impossible battle. We picked up Margot from the cafe. She'd indeed gotten 3 hot chocolates and drove east toward Matthews. The cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking farmland, bare oak trees, casting long shadows across rows of headstones. I'd only been here once for the funeral once a week later, when I could barely remember my own name through the grief. Today, I carried red twig dogwood stems, their bark bright crimson against the snow. Margot walked beside me, mittened hand in mine, carrying something tucked under her coat. Why red sticks? She asked as we climbed the hill. Your mom planted a red twig dogwood in your backyard when you were born, I said. She told me it was her favorite because it stayed beautiful even in winter. When everything else looked dead, it turned bright red. Margot considered this. Like hope. Yeah, I said. Like hope. Eleonora's headstone was simple granite, her name and dates carved in clean lines. Someone, probably Simone, had left a small potted pine tree decorated with white lights. I knelt and placed the dogwood stems against the base of the stone. Margot stood very still, staring at her mother's name. Grandpa. Her voice was small. Can Mommy hear us? I didn't know how to answer that. I'd never been religious, never believed in anything I couldn't measure or calculate. But I'd also never believed a man could murder his own wife for money. And here we were. See, I think, I said carefully, that if love is strong enough, it finds a way to stay. So maybe she can. Margot nodded. She pulled a folded piece of paper from inside her coat, the edges careful and precise. I wrote her a letter. My throat tightened. Do you want to read it? No. She knelt and placed it on the grave, weighted down with a small stone. It's private, just for Mommy. But the paper had unfolded slightly in the wind, and I caught a glimpse of the first line written in Margot's careful third-grade handwriting. Dear Mommy, thank you for being brave. I looked away, blinking hard against the sting in my eyes. 8 years old, and she understood. She knew what her mother had done, what it had cost, why it mattered. Margot stood and slipped her hand back into mine. I promised your mom I'd keep you safe, I said to the headstone, to Eleonora, to whatever part of her might still be listening. And I'm keeping that promise. The wind moved through the bare oaks, a sound like whispered acknowledgement. We stood there together as the December sun dropped toward the horizon, turning the snow gold, the dogwood stems blazing red against white stone. Margot leaned against my side, and I wrapped my arm around her small shoulders. Finally, she looked up at me. Grandpa, can we come back? Not just once, a lot. As many times as you want, I promised. She nodded, satisfied, and turned back to the grave one more time. I love you, Mommy, she whispered. Then she tugged my hand, ready to go, and we walked back down the hill together. Behind us, the letters stayed pinned beneath its stone ink, already fading in the winter light. But the words remained. Thank you for being brave. And somewhere in those 4 words was everything Margot needed to know about the woman who'd given her life and then given it again. Simone's call came 3 days after Christmas. I was in the kitchen helping Margot frost sugar cookies shaped like snowmen when the phone rang. The house smelled of vanilla and cinnamon. Margot was concentrating hard, her tongue caught between her teeth. I stepped into the hallway. It's done, Simone said. Jacqueline signed the plea. Reckless homicide, elder financial abuse, evidence tampering, reduced sentence for full cooperation. Through the doorway, I watched Margot press tiny chocolate chips onto a cookie snowman. Eleonora deserved more than reckless homicide. She did, Simone said quietly. But this guarantees Bryce goes to trial with his wife testifying against him. A guaranteed conviction versus a riskier trial. They made the call. I understood the calculus. 50 years in aerospace had taught me the difference between the achievable solution and the ideal one. 12 to 15 years, Simone continued. Eligible for parole after 10 in exchange for testifying against Bryce. 10 years. Eleonora had already been gone 3. In 10 years, Margot would be 18, and Jacqueline would walk free. There's something else. Jacqueline had been researching brake line failure methods for 2 months before suggesting it to Bryce. Search history, mechanical engineering forums, accident reconstruction studies. She wasn't just the accomplice, Jasper. She was the architect. I closed my eyes. Bryce had provided the motive. Jacqueline had provided the method, studied, planned, calculated exactly how to make murder look like mechanical failure. Why did she give us the USB? I asked. Self-preservation. Once she realized Bryce was setting her up to take the fall alone, she flipped. The prosecutor thinks she kept that footage as insurance from the beginning. Even the confession had been strategic. Even cooperation was calculated survival. Bryce's trial was set for March. I thanked Simone and ended the call. Margot looked up from the kitchen table, beaming. Grandpa, come see, I made you. She decorated one cookie with white icing for hair and drawn glasses with a toothpick. It looked nothing like me and exactly like me at the same time. Perfect, I said. How do you measure justice against a life stolen? Against a child starting kindergarten without her mother, against birthdays and bedtimes that would never come. 12 to 15 years for Jacqueline. Whatever Bryce received at trial. Numbers on a sentencing guideline, variables in an equation that could never truly balance. But Margot was safe. The money was protected. And Eleonora's killers would face consequences. Sometimes the achievable solution was the only one you got. New Year's Eve arrived quiet and cold. After Margot fell asleep, I sat at my desk with the engineering logbook I'd started November 15th, the day my card was declined at the grocery store. I turned to the last blank page and wrote, December 31st, 2022. 11:58 p.m. Structure complete. Foundation sound, ready to build. That's when I noticed it, crayon marks on the inside back cover. Margot's drawing two stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small. Beneath them in careful printing, me and Grandpa building something. Outside fireworks announced midnight. I touched the drawing with one fingertip. The new structure was already under construction. Margot spilled cereal on her math homework the same morning I noticed we were out of milk. It was a Tuesday in November, exactly 1 year since the card decline that had started everything. She sat at the kitchen table dabbing at the mess with a paper towel, frowning at her smudged multiplication problems. 9 years old now, taller. Her red hair pulled back in a ponytail that swung when she moved. Eleonora's hair. Eleonora's expression when she concentrated. "We need more milk," she announced. "I'll pick some up later," I said. "Or," she said carefully, "we could go now. Harris Teeter. The one on Wendover. They have the kind with the red cap." She met my eyes steadily, and I saw something there beyond a child's preference for a specific brand. She knew. Somehow she knew that store mattered, that this anniversary had been sitting in my chest all morning. "All right," I said. "Harris Teeter it is." The store looked exactly the same. Same automatic doors, same fluorescent lights, same dairy aisle I'd walked for 40 years. I found the milk in the same spot. 1 gallon. Whole milk. $3.99. Margot carried it to the checkout with both hands gripping the handle carefully. A teenage cashier scanned it without looking up. 427. I pulled out my card, same bank, same account now, holding exactly what it should after Simone navigated the estate settlement, and Keith's forensic work untangled every dollar Bryce had stolen. I swiped. The machine beeped once. Approved. Margot looked up and smiled. "Why do you always buy this exact milk?" she asked as we walked toward the exit. "Because this carton gave me a reason to start," I said. She nodded, considering that, and swung the bag slightly as we walked. Behind us, the card reader moved on to the next customer. It didn't know what it had just approved, $3.99 for milk, and behind it $340,000, recovered 3 years of lies, exposed 1 daughter's memory, honored 1 granddaughter saved. Systems don't know those things. They just beep and move on. Jacqueline was serving 13 years. Bryce had been convicted on all counts murder in the first-degree elder financial abuse conspiracy and sentenced to life without parole. I'd attended every day of that trial, sitting in the second row, watching my son lie on the stand. Margot had stayed with Simone, shielded from all of it. But the trial was over, and here we were buying milk on a Tuesday morning. In the car, Margot buckled her seatbelt and looked out the window. "Grandpa, I wrote an essay about brave people. I wrote about Mom. My teacher said it was the best one." I held her gaze in the rearview mirror. "I bet it was," I said quietly. She hummed something tuneless and happy. The milk sat secure on the floor. Sunlight poured through the windshield. We drove toward home together. It was enough. More than enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this: sometimes the people closest to you are capable of things you never imagined. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the signs earlier. I wish I'd questioned why my son needed money so desperately, why Eleonora seemed anxious in those final months. Don't make my mistake of assuming family would never hurt family. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. I learned that lesson at 72 years old, and I pray you learn it sooner than I did. This journey taught me that family justice isn't always served in courtrooms. Sometimes it's served at kitchen tables, assembling bed frames with a granddaughter who needs you. These dad's revenge stories you hear aren't always about vengeance. They're about protecting the innocent and honoring those we've lost. I believe God put Margot in my life for a reason, to give us both a second chance at family. Real family justice means fighting for what's right, even when it costs everything. Even when the enemy is your own blood. That's the lesson I carry forward every single day. If this story touched you, please leave a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought for family justice the way I did? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe in Dad's revenge stories that end in redemption rather than ruin, subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. A final reminder: some details in this story were fictionalized for emotional impact and storytelling purposes. What matters most is the message behind it, the lesson about protecting those who can't protect themselves.